He dropped the eviction notice on the mahogany desk before the dirt on my mother's grave had even settled. No tears, just a cold command that he had sold the house, and I had exactly 1 hour to get out. I stared at the signature on the deed, a shaky, insulting forgery. Outside, a black SUV waited like a vulture. I did not scream or beg. I simply decided that if he wanted to sell his soul, I would hold the pen. My name is Ella Perez. I am 34 years old, and exactly 45 minutes ago, I watched a mahogany casket descend 6 feet into the damp earth of Maplecroft, Pennsylvania. My shoes were still caked with the graveyard mud. The hem of my black dress was still heavy with the scent of lilies and rain. I had not even had time to wash the death off my hands before Calvin Rourke decided to bury me too. He was waiting for me in the study. Juniper Hill House was a sprawling colonial revival beast of a property, the kind of place that smelled of lemon polish and old money, even if the money had been running dry for years. My mother loved this house. She loved the light in the solarium and the way the oak floorboards creaked in the winter. Now, the house felt like a morgue. The heating was turned up too high, stifling and dry, sucking the moisture right out of my skin. Calvin stood behind my mother's desk. He was not wearing black. He was wearing a navy suit, crisp and tailored, the kind a man wears to a board meeting where he intends to fire half the staff. He looked at me not as a stepdaughter, or even a grieving woman, but as an obstruction in his calendar. He did not offer a condolence. He did not ask how I was holding up. He simply reached into his leather briefcase and slapped a thick stack of documents onto the desk. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. "It is done," Calvin said. His voice was steady, devoid of any tremor. "I have sold the house," I blinked, the words taking a moment to filter through the fog of exhaustion in my brain. "What?" "The house," he repeated, enunciating slowly as if speaking to a child. "I closed the deal this morning while you were at the service. It is sold. The new owners want immediate possession." He checked his watch, a gold Rolex that I knew he had bought using my mother's credit line 2 years ago. "You have exactly 1 hour to get your things and get out. I am changing the locks at 2 o'clock. My stomach turned over. "You cannot sell this house. Calvin, it is in the trust. Mom told me—" "Your mother told you a lot of things," he interrupted, sliding the papers toward me across the polished wood. "But before the coma, when she was lucid, she signed the transfer. She knew we needed the liquidity. She wanted to make sure I was taken care of." I looked down at the paper. It was a quitclaim deed, transferring full ownership from the Perez family trust solely to Calvin Rourke. And there it was, the signature. It was black ink, slightly smeared at the tail. I stared at it, and the room seemed to tilt. My mother had been an architect. Her handwriting was precise, architectural, all sharp angles and deliberate spacing, even when she got sick, even when the medication made her weak. She maintained a certain rigidity in her hand. This signature was a disaster. The loop on the P in Perez was wide and lazy. The slant was backward. The pressure was uneven, heavy at the start, and trailing off at the end. It looked like someone trying to copy a signature from memory while their hand was shaking with adrenaline. It was not just a forgery. It was an insult. It was a caricature of my mother's name. "She did not sign this," I said. My voice surprised me. It was not loud. It was dead calm. Calvin sneered, a tight expression that showed his teeth. "She did. I was there. The notary was there. It is ironclad. Ella, do not embarrass yourself by making a scene." "This looks like a child signed it," I said, looking up at him. "Or a desperate man." Calvin's face hardened. He leaned over the desk, invading my space. "You have 55 minutes left. Tessa Lyle is moving her things into the master suite, and she wants the guest room, your room, cleared out for her studio." The name hit me harder than the eviction. Tessa Lyle, his executive assistant, the woman who had been wearing my mother's vintage Cartier necklace in the funeral photos posted on social media just hours ago. He was not just kicking me out. He was replacing my mother before her body was even cold. I wanted to scream. I wanted to claw his eyes out. But then I looked past him, out the bay window that overlooked the driveway. A black SUV was parked just outside the iron gates. It was idling, the exhaust puffing white into the gray air. It was parked at a weird angle, aggressive, blocking the exit. Two men sat in the front seats. They were not real estate agents. They were not movers. They were thick-necked, wearing cheap sunglasses despite the overcast sky, and they were staring fixedly at the front door. I knew that look. I worked in corporate compliance before I took leave to care for Mom. I knew the look of men who were paid to ensure a transaction went through. They were enforcement. They were debt collectors. Calvin was not selling the house because he wanted to move on. He was selling it because he was drowning. I looked back at him. He was tapping his fingers on the desk, a nervous, staccato rhythm. He was sweating, just a little, along his hairline. "You are in trouble," I said softly. "I am fine," he snapped. "I am managing the estate. Unlike you, I do not have the luxury of falling apart and weeping in front of the neighbors. You made quite a face out there today, Ella. Very dramatic. It makes people talk. I do not need people talking. I need this house cleared." He was worried about appearances. He was worried about the neighbors seeing the men in the SUV. He needed me gone so he could hand over the keys and get his wire transfer. I realized then that arguing was useless. If I fought him now, if I refused to leave, he would call the police. Or worse, he would call the men in the SUV. I was alone here. Reed, my husband, was back in the city, an hour away. "Fine," I said. Calvin blinked, surprised by my sudden capitulation. "Fine. I will go," I said. "I need boxes." "There are bags in the kitchen," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "Take what you want, but the furniture stays. The art stays. That is all part of the sale inventory." I turned and walked out of the study. My legs felt heavy, but my mind was racing at 100 miles per hour. I had less than an hour to salvage my life. I went straight upstairs to my room, the room I had grown up in. I grabbed my suitcase from the closet and threw it open on the bed. I did not pack clothes first. I went to the small safe in the back of my closet. I punched in the code, passport, birth certificate, and then, the most important thing, the blue medical folder, for the last 6 months. While Calvin was away on business or networking, I was the one sleeping in the plastic chair next to Mom's hospital bed. I was the one signing the intake forms. I was the one handling the insurance. I had every medical record, every doctor's note, and every timeline of her cognition. This folder proved that on the date Calvin claimed she signed that deed. Mom was under heavy sedation, unable to lift a spoon, let alone sign a legal document transferring a $3 million property. I shoved the folder into the laptop sleeve of my bag. Next, I grabbed my laptop. I worked remotely, and that machine had backups of the house's security logs. I prayed Calvin had not wiped the server yet. Then, clothes. I didn't fold them. I grabbed armfuls of sweaters, jeans, anything within reach, and stuffed them into the suitcase until the zipper strained. I went to the bathroom and swept my toiletries into a tote bag. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Reed. I stared at the screen. I wanted to hear his voice. I wanted to tell him that Calvin was a monster and that I was scared. But I remembered the men in the SUV. If Reed came here, he would make a scene. He would try to fight Calvin, and those men outside would intervene. I declined the call. My fingers trembled as I typed a text message. "Do not come here. There are men watching the gate. I am leaving now. Meet me at the apartment." I looked around the room one last time. It was being erased. My posters were gone. Taken down weeks ago when Mom got sick. The shelves were bare. But on the nightstand, there was a small wooden music box. It was nothing expensive, just a trinket Mom had bought me in Vienna when I was 10. It played The Blue Danube and had a chipped paint corner. I grabbed it. It was the only thing in the room that felt like mine anymore. 15 minutes, Calvin yelled from the bottom of the stairs. His voice echoed up the grand staircase, hollow and impatient. I zipped the bag. I slung my laptop bag over my shoulder. I took a deep breath. trying to steady my heart rate. Get out safely. I told myself, get out, and then burn him down. I walked out to the landing. The house was silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the foyer. As I descended the stairs, I saw the living room to my left. It was already staged for the new owners. The personal photos were gone. The throw blankets were folded with military precision. But near the door to the garage, something caught my eye. It was a cardboard box, half-taped, sitting on a chair. It looked like trash Calvin had meant to throw out but forgot in his haste. A label was peeling off the side. I walked over, my footsteps silent on the runner carpet. The box was full of office supplies, old toner cartridges, rubber bands, and a stack of notary log sheets. But on top, partially sliding out of a manila envelope, was a sheet of adhesive notary seals, the gold foil kind that you stick on a document to make it official. I froze. I reached out and tilted the envelope. I could see the receipt tucked inside. It was from a same-day office supply delivery service. The date on the receipt was yesterday. My heart hammered against my ribs. The deed Calvin showed me was dated 3 months ago. He claimed Mom signed it before she went into the coma. But these notary seals, the specific brand and batch number visible on the packaging, were purchased yesterday. He had not just forged her signature. He had fabricated the entire notarization process 24 hours ago. He was rushing. He was so desperate to close this sale that he had gotten sloppy with the physical evidence. He had likely printed the deed, signed it himself, stamped it with a seal he bought online or had delivered yesterday, and backdated the whole thing. He was not just a thief. He was an amateur. I heard his footsteps clicking on the hardwood of the hallway. I pulled my hand back and stepped away from the box. I did not take it. I could not take it without him noticing. But I had seen it. I memorized the logo on the delivery receipt, Speedy Ship Office Supplies. Order 44,902. Calvin rounded the corner. He looked at my suitcase, then at the tote bag, and finally at my face. He seemed relieved. Good, he said, checking his watch again. You are efficient when you want to be. The new owners will be here at 3. You are enjoying this, I said. It was not a question. I am surviving, Ella, he said, smoothing his tie. That is what the world is. Survival. Your mother understood that. She would want me to be secure. My mother would have spat in your face, I said. He flinched, just for a second. Then his expression smoothed back into that mask of corporate indifference. Leave your key on the table. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the brass key to Juniper Hill House. I had carried this key since I was 14. It was heavy, cool metal. I looked at it, thinking of all the times I had unlocked that door. Running in from school, running in from the rain, coming home for Thanksgiving. I dropped it on the foyer table. It made a dull clatter. Goodbye, Calvin, I said. I walked to the heavy oak front door and opened it. The cold air rushed in, smelling of impending snow and exhaust fumes. The black SUV was still there, the men inside watching me as I dragged my suitcase onto the porch. I stopped and turned back to look at him one last time. He was standing in the center of the foyer, framed by the expensive molding, looking like the lord of the manor, but I saw the sweat on his collar. I saw the way his eyes darted to the window every few seconds. I saw the tremor in his hand as he reached for the key I had just dropped. He thought he had won. He thought he had bullied the grieving daughter into submission. He thought $50,000 or whatever debt he owed was about to be wiped clean. He had no idea what I had seen in that box. You really think you are going to get away with it, I said. He smiled, a thin, cruel curving of his lips. I already have. Drive safe. Ella. I looked him dead in the eye. You just enjoy it, I said, my voice low and cutting through the drafty hallway. You enjoy every single second of this while you still can. I didn't wait for his response. I pulled the door shut, hearing the heavy click of the latch. I walked down the stone steps, past the manicured hedges, and toward my car. I could feel the eyes of the men in the SUV on me, tracking my movement. I threw my bags into the trunk of my sedan, got in, and locked the doors. My hands were shaking so badly, I had to grip the steering wheel for 10 seconds before I could start the engine. I didn't look back at the house. I shifted into drive and rolled past the black SUV. The man in the passenger seat turned his head, watching me go. I drove. I drove fast. I drove until the house was just a speck in the rearview mirror, and then it was gone. But as I merged onto the highway, heading toward the city, the tears finally stopped. The grief was still there, a heavy stone in my chest, but something else was growing around it, something hot and sharp. I wasn't just a victim of eviction anymore. I was a witness, and Calvin Rourke had just handed me the weapon I needed to destroy him. The apartment smelled of burnt coffee and other people's cooking. It was a studio in South Point, a temporary rental Reed had found online while I was driving away from the estate. It was on the 4th floor of a brick building that had been converted into apartments in the 90s and had not seen a paintbrush since. The radiator in the corner hissed like a dying animal every 20 minutes, and the walls were so thin I could hear the neighbor 2 doors down arguing about a cable bill. It was the complete opposite of Juniper Hill. There were no crown moldings here, no solarium, no silence, just the oppressive, claustrophobic weight of the city pressing in on all sides. I sat on the edge of the sagging mattress, staring at the peeling laminate flooring. My suitcase was open, spilling clothes I had packed in a panic just 2 hours ago. My mother's medical folder was on the small laminate table, next to Reed's laptop. Reed was standing by the window, looking out at the alleyway. He hadn't said much since I arrived. He had just held me while I shook, his arms the only solid thing in a world that had suddenly turned liquid. Reed was a risk analyst for Stratwell Compliance Group. He dealt in worst-case scenarios for a living. He looked at spreadsheets and saw disasters before they happened. Right now, he was looking at me, and I knew he was calculating the damage. "We should go back," Reed said, turning to face me. "We should go back with the police. You have rights. Ella, he can't just throw you out. Eviction takes months. There are laws." "He changed the locks," I said. My voice sounded hollow in the small room. "And he has men there, big men. If we go back, it becomes a confrontation. The police will show up, see a deed with my mother's signature, and tell us it is a civil matter. They will tell us to hire a lawyer and file a suit, and while we are filing paperwork, Calvin will sell the house." I closed my eyes, and suddenly, I wasn't in the cramped studio anymore. I was back in the oncology ward at St. Jude's, 6 months. That was how long the nightmare had lasted. I remembered the smell of that hospital antiseptic, floor wax, and cafeteria soup. I remembered the way my back ached from sleeping on those terrible plastic chairs in the waiting room because I was afraid to leave her side. I remembered the sound of the monitors, the rhythmic beeping that counted down the seconds of her life. Where was Calvin then? "I have a conference in Chicago," he had said over the phone, his voice tinny and distant. "Networking is crucial right now. Ella, the market is volatile." "She is asking for you," I had told him, standing in the hospital corridor, clutching a cup of lukewarm tea. "She doesn't know where she is. She wants her husband." "Tell her I love her," he had said, dismissively. "I will wire some money for the private nurses. Make sure you keep the receipts." He was always away, Chicago, Miami, New York, always chasing a deal, always networking, always too busy to hold his wife's hand while the morphine dripped into her veins. But the withdrawals from the joint account never stopped. I remembered logging into the bank app one night at 3 a.m, sitting in the dark next to her bed. The blue light of the screen illuminating her pale face. $5,000 for consulting fees, $3,000 for travel expenses, a $10,000 cash withdrawal at a branch in Atlantic City. When I confronted him about it a week later, he had looked at me with that sneering pity he reserved for anyone who didn't wear a tie to work. "You do not understand finance, Ella," he had said, adjusting his cuffs. "Liquidity is complex. I am moving assets to protect the estate from tax liability. Do not bore yourself with things above your pay grade." Above my pay grade, I opened my eyes. The anger in my chest was a cold, hard knot. It wasn't the money, it was the disrespect. It was the way he had looked at my mother, a woman who had built that house, built her portfolio, built a life, and saw nothing but an ATM machine that was taking too long to dispense cash. Reed walked over to the table and tapped the spacebar on his laptop. The screen flared to life, casting a harsh glow on his face. "I have been looking at the accounts you managed to download before he locked you out of the main system," Reed said. His voice was professional, stripped of emotion. This was how he coped. He analyzed. "Ella, this isn't just bad management. This is asset stripping. Look at the timeline." I stood up and walked over to him. On the screen was a spreadsheet Reed had compiled. "Here," he pointed to a cluster of dates in November. 2 weeks after your mom went into the coma, he maxed out the home equity line of credit, $200,000, gone in 3 days. "Where did it go?" I asked. "Shell companies," Reed said. "Generic LLCs, Apex Consulting." She was 28, aspiring to be an influencer or a lifestyle consultant, or whatever title justified doing nothing but spending other people's money. There was a new post, uploaded 2 hours ago. It was a photo taken at the funeral reception, my mother's funeral reception. The caption read, "So hard to say goodbye, but we have to stay strong for the living. Supporting my love. Calvin on this difficult day." The photo showed Tessa holding a glass of wine, looking mournfully at the camera. She was wearing a black dress that was inappropriate for the occasion, too tight, too short. But that wasn't what stopped my heart. It was her neck. Resting against her collarbone was a gold necklace with a distinctive pendant, a small, diamond-encrusted lark. I gasped. A sound that was half sob, half growl. "What?" Reed asked, looking up from the screen. I shoved the phone at him. "Look at her neck." Reed squinted at the screen. "A necklace." "Not just a necklace," I said, my voice trembling. "That is Mom's Cartier lark. Dad gave it to her for their 20th anniversary. She wore it to my graduation. She wore it to every major event of her life. She told me, explicitly, that she wanted me to have it. She said, 'Ella, this is for you when I'm gone. It is your flight.'" I grabbed the phone back and zoomed in on the image. The pixels blurred, but the shape was undeniable. Tessa Lyle was wearing my inheritance. She was wearing my mother's history around her neck like a trophy. "He gave it to her," I said. "He went into Mom's jewelry box, probably while she was dying in the hospital, took it, and gave it to his mistress." This was different than the house. The house was wood and stone. The house was money. This was personal. This was erasure. Calvin didn't just want the $3 million from the sale. He wanted to wipe us out. He wanted to erase the memory of the Perez family so he could rewrite history with himself as the tragic widower and Tessa as the new comfort in his life. He was stealing the past. "We call the police," Reed said, his jaw tightening. "Right now, that is theft. We show them the will. We show them the photo." I stood up and paced the small room, from the kitchenette to the window and back again. 3 steps, turn, 3 steps, turn. "No," I said. Reed looked at me like I was crazy. "Ella, she is wearing stolen property. If we call the police now," I said, stopping to look at him, "they will go to the house. They might retrieve the necklace. Maybe Calvin will say it was a gift. He will say Mom gave it to him to give to Tessa. It becomes he said, she said, and the house. He will still sell it. He will claim he has the right. The police will file a report and tell us to sue." "So we just let them win?" Reed asked. "No," I said. "We let them feel safe." I walked over to the window and looked out at the brick wall of the adjacent building. A single yellow light bulb buzzed above a dumpster. "If I stop him now," I said, formulating the thought as I spoke. "I stop him on a technicality. I stop him on a minor theft or a civil dispute about a signature. He gets a slap on the wrist. He keeps the money he already stole. He drags the estate through probate court for 5 years until there is nothing left." I turned back to Reed. "I saw the notary seals. Reed, I saw the desperation. He is about to sell a $3 million house to a third party using a forged deed. That is not a civil dispute. That is wire fraud. That is grand larceny. That is a federal crime. Reed's eyes widened. He was a compliance officer. He knew exactly where I was going. You want him to sell it, Reed said slowly. I want him to try, I corrected. I want him to walk into a closing room. I want him to sign his name on the final documents. I want him to accept the wire transfer, because once he does that, once he takes the money, he has crossed a line he cannot walk back from. If we stop him now, he is just a jerk who tried to cheat. If we stop him at the closing table, he is a felon. It was a gamble, a massive, terrifying gamble. If I let him sell, I risked losing the house forever if the buyer was bona fide and I couldn't prove the fraud in time. But if I intervened too early, Calvin would just snake away, find another lawyer, find another way to bleed us dry. It is dangerous, Reed said. If the new owners take possession, we have to be faster than them, I said. We have to be smarter. Reed stared at me for a long moment. Then he nodded. He turned back to his laptop. If we are doing this, we need to know everything. We need to know who he is selling to. We need to know the timeline. He began typing furiously. I am checking the MLS and the off-market listings. If he closed the deal or is about to close, it has to be listed somewhere, or at least recorded. The room was silent for a few minutes. Save for the clacking of keys and the hiss of the radiator, I sat back on the bed, staring at the photo of Tessa. Enjoy the necklace. I thought, wear it. Let it weigh you down. Got it, Reed said. I rushed to his side. He listed it yesterday, Reed said, scrolling through a web page. But look at this. He pointed to the listing source. It wasn't on the major real estate sites. It was on a niche investment portal, the kind used by flippers and cash buyers looking for distressed assets. The seller profile, Reed noted. It is not under Calvin Rourke or the estate. It is under a user named CR Holding 77. Account created 48 hours ago. Email address is a generic Gmail account. He is hiding, I said. And look at the description, Reed said. He highlighted the text. Historic estate. Immediate possession. Cash only. Title clean and unencumbered. No probate issues. Motivated seller. No probate issues, I read aloud. He is lying to the buyer, too. He is telling them the trust is dissolved or doesn't exist. He is trying to bypass the title search, Reed said, his analyst brain firing on all cylinders. He is looking for a cash buyer who doesn't ask too many questions, someone who wants a deal and will skip the deep diligence. That is why he needs you out today. He can't show the house if the daughter is living there claiming ownership. He is rushing, I said. He is sloppy. And that, Reed said, looking up at me with a grim smile, is exactly what we are going to use. I looked at the screen, at the grainy photo of my childhood home listed for a price that was insulting. $2.5 million. He was underselling it to move it fast. I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. The grief was still there, but it was packaged now, stored away in a box to be opened later. Right now, I didn't have time to be a daughter. I had to be an adversary. He thinks I'm crying in a hotel room somewhere, I said softly. He thinks I am calling relatives to complain. I reached into my bag and pulled out the hard drive containing the backup of the home security system. Let's see what else he has been doing in that house, I said. Let's see what the cameras saw while I was at the funeral home. Reed plugged the drive in. The folder popped up, hundreds of video files. We have work to do, I said. The smell of the old coffee in the apartment didn't bother me anymore. The thin walls didn't matter. This cramped, ugly little room was no longer a refuge. It was a war room, and Calvin Rourke had no idea that the war had already begun. The laptop screen glowed blue in the dim light of the studio apartment, casting harsh shadows on the peeling paint of the walls. I sat cross-legged on the floor, the computer balancing precariously on my knees. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Access denied. The system read. I let out a breath I did not realize I'd been holding. Of course, Calvin was not a technological genius, but he was paranoid. He had changed the master password to the Juniper Hill smart home system. He had probably paid some Geek Squad teenager $200 to come out and reset the admin credentials the moment my mother slipped into the coma. He locked us out, Reed said, leaning over my shoulder. He was holding a mug of tea that had gone cold an hour ago. He must have reset the router bridge. He reset the main system, I said, my eyes narrowing. But Calvin doesn't know the house, not the way I do. He treats Juniper Hill like a hotel. He lives on the surface. I closed the main browser tab and opened a command prompt window. Years ago, before Mom got sick, we had a series of home health aides come through to help with her physical therapy after a minor hip surgery. Mom had been suspicious. She thought one of them was snooping in her office. She had asked me to install something discreet, something that did not run through the main central hub in the basement, which was prone to crashing whenever a thunderstorm rolled through Pennsylvania. I had installed a standalone system, a set of 3 pinhole cameras hidden in the bookshelves of the library and the molding of the study. They were hardwired into a separate localized server, a dusty black box hidden behind a false panel in the air conditioning vent of the guest room. It had its own power backup, its own encrypted IP address, and Calvin, who couldn't even figure out how to program the coffee maker, definitely did not know it existed. What are you doing? Reed asked, watching me type in a string of numbers. I am bypassing the cloud, I said. I am pinging the local drive directly. A login prompt appeared on the black screen. It was an old interface, clunky and gray, looking like something from the early 2000s. User admin password. I hesitated. It had been 4 years since I set this up. I tried the usual combinations: my birthday, Mom's birthday, the date she bought the house. Login failed. Think, Ella, I whispered to myself. What would Mom have asked me to set it to? I remembered the day we installed it. Mom was laughing, holding a glass of iced tea, telling me that passwords should be things that make you smile, not things that make you calculate. She had pointed to the old oil painting above the fireplace. Try the security question option, Reed suggested. I clicked the link. Question: the name of the general. I smiled. It was a cold, sad smile. The general wasn't a military man. It was what we called our old, one-eyed golden retriever who used to patrol the property lines like he was guarding Fort Knox. He died when I was 20. I typed in the name, Buster. The screen flickered. A green loading bar crawled across the bottom. Then, the feed popped up. It was grainy, black and white night vision. But the wide-angle lens captured the entire library perfectly. The timestamp in the corner read, January 20th, 2026, 11:42 p.m. That was last night, Reed said, his voice dropping to a hush. The night before the funeral. I clicked the audio icon. The sound was filled with static hiss for a moment before clarifying. On the screen, Calvin was sitting in my mother's favorite leather armchair. His tie was undone, hanging loose around his neck. A bottle of Macallan the 25-year-old vintage Mom was saving for a special occasion was open on the side table. It was half empty. Tessa Lyle was there too. She was pacing the room, holding a stack of papers. She looked nervous, in the infrared light. Her eyes looked like hollow black pits. It is too risky. Cal. Tessa's voice came through the speakers. She sounded shrill. I am telling you, the signature looks wrong. I compared it to the checks in the drawer. The loop on the P is way too wide. My heart hammered against my ribs. I turned up the volume. Calvin took a long drink, not bothering with a glass. It does not matter what it looks like, Tessa. It matters that it is notarized. Once the seal is on it, the burden of proof shifts. If Ella wants to contest it, she has to hire a forensic handwriting expert. That takes weeks. We will be gone by then. But the date, Tessa pressed. You backdated it 3 months. What if someone checks the notary log? What if they check the visitor logs at the hospital? Nobody checks anything, Calvin shouted. The audio spiked, distorting his voice into a jagged growl. He slammed the bottle down. This is a cash deal. The buyers are investors. They do not care about the provenance. They care that they are getting a $3 million property for 2.5. Greed makes people blind. Tessa, use that. Reed gripped my shoulder. He just admitted it. We have him on tape admitting to the forgery. Keep listening, I said, on the screen. Calvin rubbed his face with both hands. He looked exhausted. He looked like a man who was running from something much scarier than a stepdaughter. We need the wire to clear by Friday, Calvin said, his voice lower now. The guy from the city called again. He is not willing to extend the grace period. The guy? Tessa stopped pacing. I thought you said it was credit card debt. I thought you said it was leverage for the new business. Calvin laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. Credit card companies send letters. Tessa, these people send guys to your door with baseball bats. Or worse, they know where you live. They know where I park my car. I froze. This wasn't just financial mismanagement. This wasn't just a midlife crisis gambling problem. Calvin had borrowed money from the kind of people who operated outside the banking system. How much? Tessa asked. 600,000, Calvin said. Plus interest? It compounds weekly, if I do not pay them by the end of the week. They are going to take more than just the car. I looked at Reed. He is selling the house to pay off a loan shark. That explains the rush, Reed said. And the price drop. He needs liquid cash immediately. He can't wait for a traditional mortgage approval process. On the screen? Tessa looked terrified. And what about us? What about the plan? We pay the debt, Calvin said, leaning back and closing his eyes. We take the remaining $2 million almost, and we go, Costa Rica, Belize, somewhere without an extradition treaty, or at least somewhere cheap enough to live like kings until the heat dies down. Ella will be stuck here fighting a ghost legal battle over a house that has already been sold. Did you get the notary? Tessa asked. The mobile guy. Yeah, Calvin said. He is coming tomorrow morning, before the funeral service. Cost me $500 extra for the backdating. But he is flexible. He doesn't ask questions as long as the cash is green. I paused the video. My hands were shaking. But this time it wasn't fear. It was adrenaline. We have everything, I said. We have the motive. We have the method. We have the admission of forgery. We even have the plan to flee. Don't just save it, Reed said sharply. He moved around the table and took control of the laptop. If we just copy this file to a USB drive, a defense attorney will tear it apart. They will say it is a deepfake. They will say we altered the audio. AI voice generation is too good these days. Audio evidence is barely admissible unless it is authenticated. So what do? I asked. We hash it, Reed said. His fingers flew across the keyboard. He opened a terminal window that looked like gibberish to me, full of code and command lines. I am going to generate a cryptographic hash of the file right here on the server, before we even download it. Then I am going to email that hash to a third-party timestamping service. It creates a digital fingerprint. It proves that this exact video file existed in this exact state at this exact moment. If anyone tries to say we doctored it later, the math won't match. I watched him work. This was the Reed I fell in love with, the man who saw chaos and built a structure around it. He was building a cage for Calvin, bar by digital bar. Done, Reed said after a minute. Now we download. I am pulling the whole night. We need context. He initiated the transfer. The progress bar crawled forward. I resumed the video while the file downloaded in the background. The scene jumped forward an hour. The bottle of scotch was significantly lower. Tessa was sitting on the floor now, looking through the drawers of my mother's desk. There is nothing here, she muttered. Where did she keep the jewelry appraisals? Safe deposit box. Probably, Calvin mumbled. He was slurring slightly. Then, his cell phone rang. The sound was jarring in the quiet library. Calvin jumped, nearly knocking over the bottle. He stared at the screen for a long second before answering. He did not put it on speaker, but the room was silent enough, and the microphone sensitivity was high enough, that I could hear the faint murmur of a male voice on the other end. Calvin's demeanor changed instantly. The drunkenness vanished, replaced by a rigid, terrified posture. "I told you," Calvin said into the phone. "Friday. I will have it Friday." A beat. "No, do not come here," Calvin said. He stood up, turning his back to Tessa. "Listen to me. The house is compromised. The daughter is sniffing around. If you show up here, you spook the sale. You want your money, you stay away." Another beat. "I am setting up the wire instructions now," Calvin said. "It goes straight from the title company to the account you gave me. I do not even touch it. It is clean. Just wait for the wire." He hung up and threw the phone onto the leather cushion. He stood there, breathing heavily, his hands gripping the back of the chair. "Who was that?" Tessa asked. "The insurance," Calvin said grimly. I looked at Reed. The color had drained from his face. "He is wiring the proceeds directly to them," Reed said. "He is not even laundering it through his own account first. He is instructing the title company to split the payout." "Why does that matter?" I asked. "Because," Reed said, his eyes lighting up with a dangerous realization, "title companies have strict know-your-customer laws. They have to verify where the money is going. If he gives them an account number for a shell company linked to organized crime or a black market lender, and he lies about who the recipient is on the closing statement, that is fraud," I finished. "That is money laundering," Reed corrected. "And if we can prove that the destination account is illegitimate, we don't just stop the sale, we catch him in the act of financing a criminal enterprise." I looked back at the screen. Calvin was pouring another drink, his hand shaking so badly the amber liquid splashed onto the mahogany desk, my mother's desk. He thought he was being clever. He thought he was solving his problem, but he had just given us the map to his destruction. "We need to know who that phone call was from," I said. "We need the number." "The camera angle is from behind," Reed noted. "We can't see his screen." "No," I said, leaning in. "But look at the reflection." I pointed to the glass door of the barrister bookcase standing opposite the desk. It was dark, acting like a mirror. When Calvin had held the phone up to his ear, the screen had flashed for a second before going dark. "Can we enhance that?" I asked. "This isn't CSI, Ella," Reed said. "We can't just say enhance and get a license plate, but," he squinted, "the resolution is 4K. The file size is massive. Maybe—" He paused the video at the exact second the phone screen lit up. He zoomed in on the reflection in the bookcase glass. It was a blur of light. He applied a filter, sharpening the edges, adjusting the contrast. It wasn't perfect. I couldn't read a name, but I could see the shape of the caller ID. It wasn't a contact name. It was a raw number, and the area code was visible, 215, Philadelphia, and the first 3 digits, 555. "That is not a residential number," Reed said. "That is a burner block, or a business line." He said, "Wait for the wire," I repeated. "He has already set up the instructions. That means the title company has the account number." I sat back, the adrenaline turning into cold resolve. "He thinks he locked me out," I said. "He thinks I am powerless." I looked at the digital clock on the laptop. It was now 2 a.m. The closing was likely scheduled for tomorrow or the day after. We had less than 48 hours to turn this information into a trap. "We are not going to call the police yet," I said. "We are going to let him walk into that room. We are going to let him sit down at that table, and we are going to be there when he tries to send that wire." Reed looked at me. "You want to confront him at the closing?" "I want to destroy him at the closing," I said. "I want him to feel exactly what I felt when he threw those papers on the desk. I want him to think he has won, right up until the second the handcuffs click." I closed the laptop lid. The room went dark again, save for the streetlight filtering through the blinds. "Get some sleep," I told Reed. Tomorrow, we go to see my mother's lawyer. The image of Calvin on the screen burned in my mind. The arrogance, the fear, the casual way he spoke about erasing my life to save his own skin. He had 1 hour to kick me out. I had the rest of my life to make sure he regretted it. The offices of Holloway and Finch were located in a limestone building in Center City. The kind of place where the elevators were lined with walnut paneling and the air conditioning smelled of expensive cologne and old dust. It was a stark contrast to the peeling paint of the studio apartment I had just left, and an even sharper contrast to the chaotic grief that had defined the last 48 hours of my life. Dana Holloway had been my mother's attorney for 20 years. She was a woman of steel and silk, 60 years old, with silver hair cut in a bob so sharp it could cut glass. She sat behind her desk, her hands folded over the file I had brought. She had watched the video clip Reed and I extracted from the server, the one where Calvin admitted to the forgery, the debt, and the plan to flee. She had watched it twice, in silence. Now, she took off her reading glasses and set them down on the polished wood. "He is a fool," Dana said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of a judge passing a sentence. "He is a desperate, dangerous fool. He is selling the house, Dana," I said, leaning forward. "He is closing in 2 days. He has a buyer lined up, a cash buyer. He is going to wire the money to a loan shark and disappear." "I know," Dana said. She opened a drawer and pulled out a thick, bound document. The cover was heavy blue cardstock. "But Calvin is operating under the assumption that the forgery is his only crime. He thinks he is fighting a battle of paperwork. He does not realize he is walking into a minefield your mother laid 5 years ago." I looked at the document. "Is that the will?" "This is the Perez family trust," Dana corrected. "Your mother updated it shortly after she was diagnosed with the early stages of her illness. Before the decline, she was worried. Ella. She loved Calvin, or she tried to, but she was not blind. She knew he had appetites, for risk, for status." Dana flipped the document open to a page marked with a yellow tab. "Calvin has been waving around a quitclaim deed that he forged," Dana said, "but the actual title to Juniper Hill House is held by this trust. You are the sole beneficiary. Calvin was granted what we call a conditional life estate." "He told me he owned it," I said. "He said Mom signed it over." "He lied," Dana said calmly. "A life estate means he has the right to live there. He can sleep there. He can eat there. He can park his car there. But he does not own the bricks. He does not own the land. And most importantly, he has zero power to sell, mortgage, or encumber the property in any way." "But if he forged the deed," Reed spoke up from the chair beside me, "he is trying to override the trust. He is trying to create a new chain of title." "Exactly," Dana said. She turned the document so we could read the text. It was dense legal jargon, but she pointed a manicured finger at a specific paragraph. Section 14, Clause B. "Your mother added a termination on attempt to alienate clause," Dana explained. "In plain English, it is a self-destruct button for his residency rights. The moment Calvin attempts to sell the house, the moment he signs a contract, lists the property, or represents himself as the fee simple owner to a third party, his life estate is automatically revoked. Instantly, he goes from being a legal resident to a trespasser." I stared at the words, automatic forfeiture of all rights of occupancy. "So he is already trespassing," I said. "He listed it." "Technically, yes," Dana said, "but we want more than just trespassing. We want undeniable proof of intent to defraud. We want the wire fraud charge." She flipped to another page. "And there is one more thing. Your mother was very specific about the sanctity of her home." She pointed to Clause D, the morality and exclusive use clause. Calvin's right to reside is contingent on him not cohabitating with any romantic partner other than his legal spouse during the probate period. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Tessa Lyle," Dana nodded. "If she has moved in and based on your description of the scene and her presence in the library at midnight, It appears she has then Calvin breached the trust days ago. He lost his right to that house before he even printed that fake deed. So we can stop him, I said. We can go to a judge right now, show them the trust, show them the video, and get an injunction. We can lock the doors. Dana leaned back in her chair. She looked at me, her eyes assessing. We could file an emergency petition. We could get a temporary restraining order halting the sale. It would stop the transaction. But, I asked. I heard the but in her tone. But then we are in civil court, Dana said. Calvin will claim he didn't know about the clause. He will claim the forgery is a misunderstanding. He will claim the video is doctored. He will hire a lawyer. And he will squat in that house for 18 months while we litigate. He will drain the accounts to pay for his defense. He will sell the furniture. He will ruin the property out of spite. And in the end, you will get the house back. But he might walk away without a prison sentence. She paused, letting the reality sink in. Or, Dana said, we let him proceed. Let him sell it, I asked. Let him try, Dana corrected. We let him walk into that closing room. We let him sign the warranty deed where he swears under penalty of perjury that he is the rightful owner. We let him sign the affidavit of title. We let him authorize the wire transfer. Because once he does those three things, he hasn't just violated a trust clause. He has committed federal wire fraud, bank fraud, and aggravated identity theft. We hand him the rope, Reed said softly. We hand him the rope, the chair, and the instructions on how to tie the knot, Dana said. But we need to control the environment. We cannot let him sell to a random investor. If a bona fide third party buys the house, undoing the sale is a nightmare. We need to be the buyer. I don't have $3 million, I said. You don't need it, Dana said. We create a shell entity, a legitimate-looking LLC. I can have Redbridge Acquisitions set up in an hour. We make a cash offer. We show proof of funds using a verified account from my firm's holding. We won't actually transfer it, but it will look real enough to satisfy him. We demand a quick close, 48 hours. We tell him we are doing a 1031 exchange and need to move fast. He will take the bait, I said, remembering his panic in the video. He is desperate for speed. Exactly, Dana said. We dictate the terms. We pick the title company, or at least, we steer him toward a reputable one where I know the officers. We set the time. And then, Ella, you show up. I show up, I repeated, the image of walking back into that room, of seeing his face when the trap snapped shut, made my heart rate spike. You show up with the real trust, Dana said. And we bring law enforcement, not the local beat cops. We bring the investigators who handle financial crimes. It was a terrifying plan. It required nerves of steel. It required letting a criminal think he was winning until the very last second. There is one more thing, Dana said. She opened her laptop and turned the screen toward us. I ran a check on the notary stamp from the document you saw in the video, the one Calvin backdated. On the screen was a database from the Pennsylvania Department of State. It showed a notary commission profile. Name Arthur J. Miller. Commission number 1198442. Status revoked. Revoked, I asked. 2 years ago, Dana said. For fraud, Mr. Miller was caught notarizing documents for a predatory lending scheme. He lost his license and did 6 months in county jail. Calvin is using a revoked notary, Reed said, shaking his head in disbelief. He bought a stamp with a dead number. It gets worse, Dana said. Or better. For us, the notary log you saw, the one he ordered from the office supply store, if he uses that stamp. And he signs that logbook. He is creating a physical trail linking him to a known fraudster. It is clumsy. It is the work of a man who thinks the law is just a suggestion. He mentioned a mobile notary coming, I said. He said he paid him extra. Likely Mr. Miller operating illegally, Dana said, or someone posing as him. Either way, the moment that seal hits the paper, the document is void on its face, but the crime is complete. Dana closed the laptop. She looked at me. This is high stakes, Ella. If we do this, there is no turning back. You have to be able to stand in that room and watch him sell your mother's legacy, knowing that you are the only thing stopping it from being real. Can you do that? I thought about the men in the SUV. I thought about Tessa wearing the lark necklace. I thought about my mother, working late nights at her drafting table to pay for that house, to build something that would outlast her. Calvin treated it like a poker chip. He treated me like a nuisance. I looked at the blue folder of the trust, the paper shield my mother had built for me. She had known, somewhere deep down, she had known he would do this, and she had given me the weapon to stop him. I don't just want the house back, Dana, I said. My voice was steady. I want him to understand that he never owned it. I want him to understand that he was a guest, and his checkout time was 6 months ago. Then we proceed, Dana said. She picked up her phone. I am going to file the incorporation papers for Redbridge Acquisitions. Reed, I need you to draft an offer letter. Keep it professional, cold, corporate. Make it sound like we don't care about the house. Only the asset value. He will respond to that. He understands transaction. He does not understand sentiment. What about the closing? Reed asked. He will want to pick the location. We suggest Kingswell Title, Dana said. They are high-end, marble floors, glass walls. It strokes his ego. He wants to feel like a big shot closing a big deal. We give him the stage. And the police? I asked. I have a contact, Dana said. In the district attorney's economic crimes unit. He owes me a favor. When I show him the video and the revoked notary info, he will be very interested in attending a closing where a $600,000 wire is scheduled to go to a known loan shark. Dana stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline. Your mother was a brilliant woman, Ella, she said softly. She told me once, Dana, if I die first, Calvin will be lost. He is a man who needs boundaries, or he will consume everything. She put up the boundaries. Now, we just have to watch him crash into them. I stood up too. The fear was gone. In its place was a cold, calculating precision. Let's write the offer, I said. Let's buy my own house. Dana smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous smile. Welcome to the game, Ella. We built the trap out of paperwork and pixels, sitting in the conference room of Holloway and Finch. The mood was surgical. There was no weeping, no trembling hands. The grief I had felt standing in the cemetery had crystallized into a cold, hard purpose. Dana worked at her laptop, her fingers flying across the keys as she birthed a ghost. Redbridge Acquisitions, LLC, Dana announced, hitting the final enter key. Registered in Delaware, generic, boring, the kind of company that swallows assets without chewing. She turned the screen to show us. The website was a masterpiece of corporate minimalism. Stock photos of skyscrapers, vague mission statements about distressed asset revitalization, and a contact us form that led to a secure server sitting right here in this room. It looked exactly like the kind of predatory investment firm Calvin was hoping to attract. It looks real, I said. It is real enough for a man who owes $600,000 by Friday, Reed said from across the table. He was monitoring the email server we had just set up. He is not going to check the Dun & Bradstreet rating. He is going to check the offer price. Now comes the bait, Dana said. She opened a fresh email draft. We need to hit the sweet spot. If we offer too low, he gets offended and thinks he can do better. If we offer too high, he gets suspicious. We need to offer just enough to solve his problem, but with a constraint that forces him to skip the due diligence. She began typing. The subject line was stark. Letter of intent. 122 Juniper Hill Road. All cash offer. The body of the email was a work of art. It stated that Redbridge Acquisitions was looking to complete a 1031 tax-deferred exchange, a real estate maneuver that allows an investor to defer capital gains taxes if they reinvest the money into a new property within a strict time frame. The 1031 exchange is the perfect cover, Dana explained as she typed. It gives us a legitimate reason to be in a frantic rush. We tell him our identification period expires in 48 hours. We have to close. Or we lose a massive tax break. That explains why we are willing to skip the inspection. It explains why we have cash ready. It turns his desperation into our problem. She typed the offer price, $2,300,000. That is $700,000 under market value. I noted. He will counter, Dana said. But he will bite. Send it. Reed hit send. The room went silent. The digital clock on the wall flicked from 2:14 to 2:15. I stared at the screen, imagining Calvin in his study, my mother's study surrounded by boxes. His phone buzzing. Was he drinking? Was Tessa whispering in his ear? He replied. Reed said. I blinked. Already. It has been 6 minutes, Reed said, his eyes widening. He didn't even consult a broker. He is monitoring the inbox like a hawk. Reed opened the email. It was short, riddled with typos, and reeked of panic. Dear Redbridge, received your offer. The property is a prime asset, recently appraised much higher. I have other interested parties. However, I understand your timeline. I can accommodate a fast close, but the price must be $2,600,000. The house is pristine, title is clean, no probate issues. Can we close Thursday morning? Calvin Rourke. He is lying about the other parties, I said. He listed it yesterday on a bottom feeder site. Nobody else is biting. And he is lying about the probate, Dana added, pointing to the screen. That is our first strike. He just stated in writing that there are no probate issues. That is a material misrepresentation to a buyer. Reply to him, Dana instructed Reed. Play the reluctant corporate officer. Tell him 2.6 is too high for a sight unseen deal. Offer 2.5 flat. Tell him it is our final number. Take it or leave it. But we can wire the earnest money immediately upon signing the contract. Reed typed the response. We can meet at $2,500,000, but we need a guaranteed clear title. Are there any heirs or family members who need to sign off? We do not want complications at the closing table. This was the test. We were giving him a chance to come clean. We were giving him a chance to say, yes, my stepdaughter needs to sign. The reply came back in 3 minutes. The title is sole and separate in my name. My late wife's daughter, Ella Perez, is estranged and has a history of mental instability. She has already signed a waiver relinquishing all claims to the estate in exchange for a cash settlement. She is not a factor. I have full authority to sell. I felt the blood drain from my face. Estranged, I whispered. Mental instability. He wasn't just stealing the house. He was assassinating my character to a stranger to smooth the deal. He was painting me as a crazy woman who had been paid off, just so he could grab the cash. He just dug his grave, Dana said, her voice icy. He just put in writing that you signed a waiver that does not exist, that is fraud, that is specific intent to deceive. He called me crazy, I said, my hands clenching into fists on the table. He called you a non-issue, Reed said, looking at me with fierce protection in his eyes. He is about to find out how much of an issue you are. Accept the offer, I said. Give him the 2.5. Let him think he won. Let him think he squeezed an extra $200,000 out of the stupid corporate buyers. Dana nodded. We send the contract. Standard purchase and sale agreement, but we add a rider about the closing location. Kingswell title, I said. Dana looked at me. Why them? Because it is in the Liberty Place Tower, I said. Marble floors, floor-to-ceiling glass, men in $1,000 suits. Calvin is a narcissist. If we ask to meet at a strip mall notary, he might get suspicious or feel cheap. If we tell him the closing is at Kingswell, he will feel like a mogul. He will strut in there thinking he is the smartest man in the room. I want him to feel safe. I want him to be smiling when I walk in. Dana smiled. Psychological warfare. I like it. Reed sent the confirmation. Agreed at $2,500,000. Closing set for Thursday, 10 a.m., at Kingswell Title Escrow, Philadelphia. Please forward wiring instructions for the proceeds. We waited. This was the crucial part. If he told us to wire the money to the Perez family trust account, he might have a sliver of a defense he could claim he was just liquidating the asset for the trust. But if he sent it somewhere else, incoming, Reed said. He attached a PDF. Reed opened the file. It was a scanned document, clearly printed from a home computer. Wiring instructions, Bank Keystone, Regional Bank. Account name, CR. Strategic Solutions, LLC. Account number ending in 9904, routing 055. CR Strategic Solutions. Reed read, "That is not the trust. That is not a joint account." Reed quickly opened a new tab and ran a search on the Pennsylvania Corporate Registry. Registered Agent Calvin Rourke. Incorporation date January 15th, 2026. "A week ago," Dana said. "He set up a shell company the day your mother went into hospice care. He knew she wasn't coming back." "And look at the metadata," Reed said, diving into the email headers. "He is using a VPN. The IP address bounces through a server in Switzerland, and the email client isn't Outlook or Gmail. It is an encrypted service usually used by whistleblowers or criminals. He is trying to hide the communication trail," Dana said. "He thinks if he uses a secure email and a shell company, the money will vanish before anyone connects the dots. He is layering the transaction. That is classic money laundering." "So we have him," I said. "We have him on fraud, forgery, and money laundering." "We have the attempt," Dana corrected, "to make the charges stick, to make them undeniable. He has to show up. He has to sign the deed in front of a notary, and he has to give the verbal order to initiate that wire." "He will show up," I said. "He is greedy, and now he thinks he has a cash buyer who doesn't care about his crazy stepdaughter." I looked at the email chain. The lie about me being mentally unstable stung, but it also clarified everything. Calvin didn't see me as a person. He saw me as a loose end, a malfunction in his plan. "He wants a quick close," I said. "We will give him the quickest close in history. It will be over before he even sits down. I will alert my contact at the DA's office," Dana said, closing her laptop. "I will tell them we have a live one, a 6-figure wire fraud in progress with a flight risk suspect. Tell them to bring handcuffs," Reed said. "They will," Dana assured us. "But Ella, you need to be prepared. When you walk into that room, he's going to panic. He might lash out. He might try to gaslight you in front of everyone. He is a manipulator, and when manipulators are cornered, they get vicious." "I know," I said. I touched the small pocket of my jacket where I had put the letter my mother had left for me, the one I had found in the safe box. I hadn't read it to them yet. I barely had the strength to read it myself, but I knew what it represented. "He thinks I am weak," I said. "He thinks I am the little girl who used to cry when he raised his voice. He has no idea who I have become in the last 48 hours. "We meet here at 8 on Thursday," Dana said. "Wear a suit. We are going to war." I stood up. The sun was setting outside the window, casting long shadows across the boardroom table. The city looked beautiful and cold. Somewhere out there, Calvin was probably popping a cork, toasting with Tessa, celebrating the sale of my home. He was probably counting the money in his head right now, $2,500,000. He would never see a dime of it. "Reed," I said as we walked toward the elevator, "did you save the email where he called me unstable?" "I saved it," Reed said. "I printed 3 copies. Why?" "Because," I said, pressing the button for the lobby. "I want to read it to him while they are reading him his rights." The sun had barely risen over the grimy skyline of South Point when the digital assault began. I woke up to the vibration of my phone against the nightstand. It was a relentless, angry buzzing that drilled into my skull. I reached for it, squinting against the harsh light of the screen, expecting to see updates from Reed or Dana about the Redbridge offer. Instead, I saw notifications. Hundreds of them. Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, text messages from numbers I hadn't heard from in years. Cousins in Ohio, my mother's old bridge partners, Neighbors who used to wave to me when I walked the dog. Ella, I am so sorry to hear you are struggling. How could you do this to him after everything he sacrificed? Get help. Honey, money isn't everything. My stomach dropped. I sat up, clutching the sheet to my chest, and opened the Facebook app. There, pinned to the top of Calvin Rourke's profile, was a post. It was long, written in that sickeningly earnest tone people use when they want to weaponize empathy. He had attached a photo of himself standing by my mother's grave, his head bowed, looking like the picture of tragic dignity. The text was a masterclass in manipulation. It is with a heavy heart that I have to address the rumors circulating in our community. He wrote, "Losing my beloved wife has been the hardest trial of my life. But what hurts even more is the conflict that has followed. I promised her I would protect her daughter. Ella, no matter what. Unfortunately, grief manifests in ugly ways. Ella has been struggling with significant mental health challenges for some time, and under the influence of her husband. She has made demands on the estate that are simply impossible to meet without bankrupting the legacy my wife built. I have tried to be patient. I have tried to be a father figure, but yesterday, I was forced to make difficult decisions to save the family assets from being squandered. Please pray for Ella. Pray that she finds peace, and that she stops this vendetta against the only family she has left." I read it twice. My hands were shaking so hard, I nearly dropped the phone. "He is gaslighting the entire town," I whispered. Reed sat up next to me, his hair messy from sleep. He took the phone from my hand and read the post. His jaw tightened until a muscle feather in his cheek jumped. "He is getting ahead of the narrative," Reed said, his voice low and dangerous. "He knows you might cause a scene or sue him, so he is painting you as the crazy, greedy stepdaughter before you even open your mouth. If you speak up now, people won't hear a victim, they will hear the instability he warned them about. He calls it protecting the legacy," I said, feeling a bitter laugh bubble up in my throat. "He is selling the legacy to a shell company to pay off a loan shark, and he tells the world he is saving me from myself. It was a brilliant, evil move. Calvin knew that in our social circle, the Maplecroft Country Club set, the charity board member's reputation was currency. If he destroyed my credibility, no one would believe me when I screamed fraud. He was isolating me. He was cutting off my support system so that when the house sold, I would be too ashamed to show my face." "Don't comment," Reed warned, seeing my finger hover over the reply button. "Do not engage. That is what he wants. He wants a public fight. He wants you to look hysterical." "He is lying, Reed," I snapped. "He is destroying my name." "And we are going to destroy his life," Reed said, gripping my hand. "On Thursday, at 10 o'clock in the morning, let him have the likes and the sympathy comments. We are taking the house." I forced myself to put the phone down. But the anxiety gnawed at me. It wasn't just the lies. It was the precision of them. He had targeted my weak spot. He knew I valued my privacy. He knew I hated conflict. Then, at 9 o'clock, the phone rang again. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered it, thinking it might be Dana. "Hello?" "Ella. Darling, it's Tessa." Her voice was like syrup laced with arsenic. I froze. I hadn't spoken to Tessa Lyle since the funeral, where she had stood 10 feet away from me wearing my mother's necklace. "What do you want?" "Tessa," I asked. I hit the record button on the app Dana had told me to install. "I am just calling as a friend," Tessa said. I could hear the click of heels in the background. She was probably walking through my house. "Calvin is really worried about you. This whole eviction thing, it's messy. He feels terrible about having to be so firm." "He gave me an hour," I said. "He had men with guns outside the gate." "Security," Tessa corrected smoothly. "For your own safety, you were very emotional. Calvin thought you might hurt yourself." "Is that the story?" I asked. "I am the danger. Look, Ella." Tessa's voice dropped an octave, becoming intimate and conspiring. "We know about the financial trouble Reed has been having. We know why you guys are so desperate for the inheritance money. I frowned. Reed didn't have financial trouble. We were fine. Not rich, but fine. They were inventing things now. I don't know what you are talking about, I said. And the medical records, Tessa went on, ignoring me. Calvin found your therapy notes in the house. From when you had that burnout 3 years ago, anxiety, depression, it is all there in black and white. It would be such a shame if those details became public during a legal battle. People are so judgmental about mental health these days. The air left my lungs. She was blackmailing me. She was threatening to leak my private medical history, my struggles with grief and work stress to paint me as incompetent. Are you threatening me? I asked. I am offering a solution, Tessa said. Calvin is willing to give you a small settlement, $20,000, cash. You sign a non-disclosure agreement, you stop pestering us about the house, and you go back to the city. We never release the therapy notes. The post on Facebook comes down. Everyone moves on. It was a pincer movement. Calvin hit me with the stick, the public humiliation. Tessa offered the carrot, the hush money. They were trying to make me fold before the closing. They were scared I would show up. I looked at Reed. He was typing on his laptop, listening in. He held up a piece of paper on which he had written a single word, submit. He wanted me to play dead. He wanted them to think their strategy worked. I took a shaky breath. I had to be an actress. I had to be the broken woman they wanted me to be. 20,000, I asked, making my voice wobble. That is nothing. The house is worth 3 million. It is 20,000 more than you have now, Tessa said sharply. Take it, Ella. Or by tomorrow noon. The whole town will know exactly what you talked to your shrink about. I let out a sob. It wasn't entirely fake. The cruelty was overwhelming. Fine, I whispered. I can't fight you. You win. Just please don't post the notes. Smart girl, Tessa said. I could hear the smirk in her voice. We will have the papers ready. Don't come to the house. We will mail them. Okay, I said. Just leave me alone. I hung up. The silence in the apartment was heavy. I felt dirty. I felt violated. You did perfectly, Reed said quietly. They think you are broken. They think you are taking the 20,000. They will walk into Kingswell Title on Thursday, expecting a smooth transaction with Redbridge. And they won't even be looking over their shoulders for you. She has my medical records, Reed, I said, hugging my knees. She went through my old files. It is a HIPAA violation, Reed said. It is invasion of privacy. Add it to the list. Every threat they make is another year on their sentence. Reed turned his laptop screen toward me. But we have a more immediate problem. Look at this. He had pulled up the feed from the dash cam of his car, which was parked on the street below our apartment window. The camera had a motion sensor. This was recorded 20 minutes ago, Reed said. On the screen, a gray sedan rolled slowly past our building. It slowed down as it passed Reed's car. The window rolled down, and a man took a picture of our license plate. Then he drove to the end of the block and parked. I checked the street just now, Reed said. The car is still there. He is watching the entrance. Calvin hired a tail, I said. He wants to make sure we don't go to the police, Reed said. Or maybe he wants to make sure we don't go to the house. He is paranoid. The Redbridge offer was too good to be true, and deep down, he knows it. He is covering his bases. If we leave the apartment on Thursday morning, I said, realizing the implication, that guy will follow us. He will call Calvin. Calvin will know we are coming. We can't let him warn Calvin, Reed said. We need to lose him. How? I have an idea, Reed said. But first, you need to document this. Dana said everything goes in the log. I opened the notebook Dana had given me. My hand shook as I wrote, January 21st, 9:05 a.m. Tessa Lyle called. Attempted extortion. Threatened to release private medical records unless I accepted $20,000. 9:30 a.m. Reed identified surveillance vehicle outside residence. It felt like I was writing the script of a crime thriller. But it was my life. My phone buzzed again. I flinched. If it is Calvin, I said. I am going to scream. But it wasn't Calvin. It was a text message. The sender was listed as Mrs. Gable. Mrs. Gable was my mother's best friend. She was a stern, no-nonsense woman who ran the local historical society. She hadn't commented on Calvin's Facebook post. I opened the message. Ella, I saw what that man posted. It is garbage. I know the truth. Your mother knew too. My heart skipped a beat. I typed back, Mrs. Gable. Thank you. I don't know what to do. 3 dots appeared. Then the message. Your mother came to see me 2 weeks before the coma. She was lucid. She was scared. She gave me a key. She said, if anything happens to me, and if Calvin starts acting strange, tell Ella to check the fireproof box in the garage. Not the office, the garage. I stared at the screen. The garage, I said aloud. What is it? Reed asked. Mrs. Gable, I said. She says Mom left something in the garage. A fireproof box. I closed my eyes, trying to visualize the garage at Juniper Hill. It was a 3-car detached structure, filled with my father's old tools, gardening equipment, and boxes of holiday decorations. Calvin never went in there. He hated manual labor. He parked his BMW in the driveway because he was afraid of scratching it in the narrow bay. We missed something, I said. Mom hid something else. The trust document was with Dana. The medical records were in my room, but this sounds like insurance. We can't go back there, Reed said. Calvin has security, and we have a tail outside. We have to, I said. If Mom hid it in the garage, it is because she knew Calvin wouldn't look there, and if she gave the key to Mrs. Gable. I looked at the text again. I have the key. Mrs. Gable wrote, I am at the bakery on 4th Street. Meet me. Mrs. Gable has the key, I told Reed. She is in town. It is a risk, Reed said. If the guy outside follows us to the bakery, then follows us to the house. We don't go to the house yet, I said, my mind racing. We get the key first, then we wait. Thursday morning. The closing is at 10. Calvin will leave the house by 9 to get to Philadelphia. The house will be empty, except for maybe the guards at the gate. And Tessa, Reed added. Tessa might stay behind. Tessa is vain, I said. She will want to be at the closing. She wants to celebrate the money. She won't miss the victory lap. So we sneak in while they are at the closing, Reed asked. No, I said. We can't be in 2 places at once. We need to be at the closing to stop the wire. I paced the small room. The pieces were moving around in my head. Wait, I said. The garage has a side door, the one behind the rhododendrons. The lock is broken. It has been broken since I was 12. Mom never fixed it because the keypad on the main door worked fine. Does Calvin know about the broken latch? You said he never goes in there, Reed said. He doesn't, I said. He thinks it is full of spiders and dust. I looked at Reed, and a plan began to form. A dangerous, reckless plan. We need that box, I said. Tonight? Tonight? Reed looked at the window, with the stalker outside. We switch cars, I said. We go down to the parking garage. We take the service elevator. We call an Uber to the back alley. The guy out front is watching your sedan. He won't be looking for a Toyota Corolla with an Uber sticker. And the guards at the house. They are watching the front gate, I said. They are watching for a car to pull up. They aren't watching the woods at the back of the property. I grew up in those woods. Reed, I know every deer trail. I know how to get to the garage without triggering the perimeter sensors. Ella, Reed said, grabbing my shoulders. This is breaking and entering, if they catch you. It is my house, I said fiercely. It is my garage, and whatever is in that box is the final nail in Calvin's coffin. I am not leaving it behind. I grabbed my coat. Text Mrs. Gable, I said. Tell her we are coming, and tell her to bring the key. The despair of the morning had evaporated. Calvin thought he had beaten me with a Facebook post and a blackmail threat. He thought I was cowering in a corner, crying over my reputation. He was wrong. I wasn't crying. I was hunting. and I was going back to Juniper Hill one last time. The woods behind Juniper Hill were pitch black. The old deer trail I had memorized as a child was overgrown with brambles that snagged at my coat, but I did not turn on my flashlight. Not yet. Reed was close behind me, his breathing heavy in the cold night air. We had parked the Uber a mile down the road and hiked in. Avoiding the main gate where Calvin's rented security sat in their SUV, we reached the edge of the tree line. The garage loomed ahead, a detached 3-car structure separate from the main house. It was dark, but the motion sensor light above the side door was off. Mrs. Higgins had come through. Mrs. Higgins had been our housekeeper for 15 years. Calvin had fired her the day after the funeral, citing budget cuts, but she still had her perimeter code, and more importantly, she knew where the breaker box for the external floodlights was located. She had agreed to cut the power to the garage sector for exactly 20 minutes. 10 minutes left, Reed whispered, checking the luminous dial of his watch. We have to be fast. I crept across the frozen lawn. The house itself was dark, save for a single light in the master bedroom. Calvin was probably up there, sleeping in my mother's bed, dreaming of his wire transfer. I reached the side door of the garage. I pulled the key Mrs. Gable had given me out of my pocket. My hand trembled as I slid it into the lock. It turned with a stiff, gritty click. We slipped inside and I closed the door softly behind us. The air inside was freezing, colder than the outdoors, and smelled of motor oil, sawdust, and the lavender sachets my mother used to store with the winter linens. I clicked on my small tactical flashlight, keeping the beam low to the ground. "Where is it?" Reed asked. "Mrs. Gable said the fireproof box," I whispered. "Mom wouldn't leave it in the open." I scanned the space. My father's old tool bench was covered in a layer of dust. The lawnmower sat in the corner like a dormant beast. Then I saw it. Underneath the utility sink, pushed all the way to the back behind a stack of old paint cans, was a gray metal box. It looked like a standard Sentry safe, the kind you buy at a hardware store for $50. I pulled the paint cans aside, wincing as metal scraped against concrete. I dragged the box out. It was heavy. "Do you have the combination?" Reed asked. "No," I said, "but Mrs. Gable gave me the key ring. There's a small silver key here." I tried the key. The lock popped open. I lifted the lid. I don't know what I expected. Maybe gold bars, maybe cash, but there was no money inside, just paper. Neat, organized stacks of paper, held together with binder clips. On top of the first stack was a cream-colored envelope. On the front, in my mother's distinct, architectural handwriting, was my name. "Ella read when you need courage." The breath hitched in my throat. I sat down on the cold concrete floor, ignoring the dirt. "Ella," Reed crouched beside me. "We need to go. The power comes back on in 6 minutes." "I have to see," I said. I tore open the envelope. There was a single sheet of stationery inside. "My dearest Ella, if you are reading this, 2 things have happened. First, I am gone. Second, Calvin has done exactly what I feared he would do. I love your stepfather, but I am not blind. He is a man who builds castles on sand. For the last 2 years, I have watched him make dangerous friends and even more dangerous promises. He thinks I do not know about the loans he took against the business, or the people who call him late at night demanding payments. I tried to help him, but a hole that deep cannot be filled with love. I have taken steps to protect you, the house, the portfolio. Everything is in the trust. But Calvin is desperate. Desperation makes men creative with the truth. He will try to sell Juniper Hill. He will try to tell you that I wanted him to have it. Do not believe him, and more importantly, do not let him win. Enclosed are the records he thinks he destroyed. Use them. Fight for what is yours, not for the money, but because this is your home. P.S. If the law feels too slow, call Detective David Hargrave. He helped me when Calvin's creditors first threatened us. He knows the truth. Love, Mom. I wiped a tear that had frozen on my cheek. She had known. All those times she smiled at dinner. All those times she held his hand at parties she was watching him. She was calculating. She was protecting me from a war she knew was coming. She knew, I whispered. She knew about the loan sharks. Reed was rifling through the other papers in the box. Ella, look at this, he said, holding up a document. It was a log of wire transfers. My mother had kept a handwritten ledger of every single time Calvin withdrew money from the joint account without explanation. Next to each entry, she had stapled a bank receipt. August 4th, $10,000. Consulting fee, September 12th, $15,000. Business expenses, October 1st, $50,000. Cash. She was building a case, Reed said. This isn't just a diary. This is a forensic audit. He pulled out another file. And this is the smoking gun. It was a receipt from a company called VeriSign Secure Vault. What is that? I asked. It is a digital signature service, Reed explained, his voice rushing with excitement. Wealthy people use it to prevent exactly what Calvin did. Look at the date. She signed up for this a year ago. The service requires that any legal document transferring assets over $10,000 must be digitally signed and authenticated through their encrypted server. If a document appears with just a wet ink signature like the one Calvin has, it is automatically flagged as invalid by her estate plan. So the deed he has is worthless paper, Reed said. Even if the signature looked perfect, it would be void because it lacks the digital cryptographic token she mandated. He didn't know this service existed. He couldn't forge the token because he doesn't have her biometric key. I stared at the receipt. It was a trap. She had set a trap for him a year ago. A silent alarm that would only go off if he tried to steal from her. We have everything, I said. We have the proof of his debts. We have the proof that the deed is invalid. We have the proof that he has been stealing for years. And we have a name, Reed said. Detective David Hargrave. We need to get out of here, I said, shoving the papers back into the box. I locked it and tucked it under my arm. It was heavy, but it felt like a shield. We slipped out the side door just as the floodlight above the garage flickered to life. We froze, pressing our backs against the cold siding of the garage. A security guard walked past the corner of the house, his flashlight sweeping the lawn. He was 50 yards away. If he turned his head, he would see us. We held our breath. The guard paused, lit a cigarette, and turned back toward the front gate. Go, Reed whispered. We ran. We sprinted back to the tree line, the brambles tearing at our clothes, the cold air burning our lungs. We didn't stop until we reached the road where the Uber was waiting. Back in the apartment, the atmosphere was electric. We didn't sleep. We laid the documents out on the floor like a war map. I called Dana at 6 a.m. We have the box, I told her. What is in it? Dana asked, her voice groggy but alert. Everything, I said. And a name, Detective David Hargrave. There was a silence on the other end of the line. Hargrave, Dana said. David Hargrave isn't just a detective, Ella. He is the head of the Financial Crimes Task Force for the state police. If your mother knew him, she was dealing with serious threats. She said he helped her, I said. She said he knows about the creditors. I am going to call him, Dana said. If Hargrave gets involved, this stops being a local police matter. This becomes a sting operation. We are still doing the closing, I asked. Yes, Dana said. We need Calvin to commit to the fraud. But now, when you walk into that room, you won't just have a lawyer with you. You are going to have the state police waiting in the lobby. I looked at the letter from my mom one more time. Read when you need courage. I didn't need courage anymore. I had rage, and I had the truth. Dana, I said. When we walk in there tomorrow, I don't want the police to arrest him immediately. What do you mean? I want him to sign, I said. I want him to sign the deed. I want him to hand it to the title officer. I want him to think the money is his. And then I want to introduce myself. That is risky, Dana warned. Once he signs, the title technically transfers until a court voids it. I don't care about the technicality, I said. I want him to feel the win, because it will make the fall so much harder. Dana paused. All right, but we stick to the script. Redbridge buys the house. You interrupt the wire. Hargrave makes the arrest. I hung up the phone. Reed was looking at the spending log. Ella, look at the last entry. The one from 3 days before the coma. I looked. November 10th, $200,000. Payment to Vanguard Title Loans. Notation, to keep them away from Ella. My heart broke all over again. She had drained her cash reserves to pay off his sharks, just to keep them from coming after me. She had bought my safety with her own security. He bled her dry, I said, my voice shaking. He took everything she had, and when she couldn't pay anymore, he waited for her to die so he could sell the house. He is a monster, Reed said. No, I said, standing up and walking to the window to watch the sunrise over the city. He is just a man, a small, pathetic man, who ran out of time. I touched the necklace I was wearing, not the Cartier Lark that Tessa had stolen, but a simple silver chain my mother had given me when I turned 18. Tomorrow, I said to the glass, we take it all back. The game was set. The players were in position. Calvin thought he was walking into a payday. He had no idea he was walking into his own funeral. The final 24 hours were a blur of adrenaline and paranoia. Wednesday, 4 o'clock. The sun was slanting low through the windows of Holloway and Finch. Dana was on the phone, her voice calm but her knuckles white as she gripped the receiver. Mr. Rourke, I understand your concern, she said, her tone professional and soothing. But changing the venue at this late hour is impossible. The title officers have already drawn up the paperwork for Kingswell. Moving it to your associate's office would require reissuing the insurance binder. We would miss the 1031 exchange deadline. I sat across from her, holding my breath. Calvin was getting cold feet. Yes, I understand you want to expedite things, Dana continued, rolling her eyes at me. But surely you can appreciate that a $2.5 million wire transfer requires certain protocols. 10 o'clock at Kingswell. Yes, we will see you there. She hung up and exhaled sharply. He is twitchy, Dana said. He wanted to move the closing to a strip mall office in South Philly. Someplace called Fast Track Notary. He said he wanted to sign everything tonight and just have us wire the money tomorrow. He is trying to avoid the public exposure, I said. He is scared of being seen. He is scared of you, Dana corrected. He asked if the estranged daughter would be present. I told him the buyer has no interest in family drama and that we have been assured the title is clear. He bought it. He has to, Dana said. He needs the money by Friday. He doesn't have time to find another buyer. At 5:30, Reed came back into the conference room. He had been in the back office with the IT team, finalizing the evidence package. We have everything logged, Reed said, placing a heavy binder on the table. Every email from CR Holdings, every text message threatening you, the dashcam footage of the stalker, the metadata from the photos, and the kicker, the surveillance video from the library. Is it admissible? I asked. It is authenticated, Reed said. We used a forensic timestamp service. It is as solid as concrete. Then he opened his laptop. But I found something else, something bad. My stomach tightened. What? I was digging into the email headers again, Reed said, trying to trace the other IPs he has been communicating with, and I found a draft contract attached to an email he sent 2 days ago, before he even listed the house. To who? To a group called Vertex Capital. Reed said, It is a predatory lending outfit. The contract isn't a sale. It is a deed in lieu of foreclosure agreement. He basically promised them the house as collateral for an emergency loan. He sold it twice, I asked, horrified. He tried to, Reed said. He signed a preliminary agreement with Vertex to give them the deed if he didn't pay them back by Monday. But then he got our offer from Redbridge, which is straight cash. So now he's trying to sell to us before Vertex can file their lien. That is double selling, Dana said, her eyes narrowing. That is fraud on a massive scale. If he signs the warranty deed to Redbridge tomorrow, he is legally swearing that the property is unencumbered. If he has already pledged it to Vertex, he is committing a felony the second his pen hits the paper. It makes our case stronger, I said. It makes him more dangerous, Dana warned. If Vertex finds out he is selling the asset out from under them, they might send someone to the closing too. We need security. Hargrave is on board, Dana said. I spoke to him an hour ago. He reviewed the file your mother left. He remembers her. He remembers the case. What did he say? He said he has been waiting for Calvin Rourke to slip up for 3 years, Dana said with a grim smile. He will be in the lobby at Kingswell at 9:30. He is bringing 2 plainclothes officers. They will be in the room next door, listening in. At 8 o'clock. I was back in the studio apartment. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sit still. I paced the small room, rehearsing my lines. I am Ella Perez. I am the sole beneficiary of the Perez Family Trust. You have no authority to sell this house. The game is over. Calvin. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked tired. My eyes were rimmed with red. I didn't look like an avenging angel. I looked like a grieving daughter who hadn't slept in a week. You look fierce, Reed said, coming up behind me and wrapping his arms around my waist. I look like a mess, I whispered. You look like someone who survived, he said. That is what matters. My phone buzzed on the dresser. I jumped. It was a text message. Unknown number. I picked it up, expecting another threat from Tessa, or maybe a taunt from Calvin. But the message was short. Just one sentence. If you come to the closing, you will see who is really pulling Calvin's strings. I stared at the screen. Who is this? Let me see, Reed said. He took the phone. This isn't Tessa. The syntax is different, and the number, it is a burner, but it is local. Who is pulling his strings? I asked. I thought it was just the loan sharks. Maybe it is Vertex, Reed suggested. Maybe they know he's trying to double-cross them, and they want you to blow up the deal so they can foreclose. Or maybe it is someone else, I said, a cold dread settling in my chest. Someone we haven't even seen yet. Does it change anything? Reed asked. I thought about it. Did it matter if Calvin was a puppet or the puppet master? He was still the one signing the deed. He was still the one who stole my mother's necklace. No, I said. It changes nothing. I am going to be there. Thursday morning, 7 a.m. The sky was gray and heavy with snow clouds. I dressed in a charcoal suit, the kind of suit I used to wear to board meetings. I pulled my hair back into a tight bun. I put on the silver chain my mother gave me. I looked at the photo of my mother I kept in my wallet. Read when you need courage. Let's go, I said to Reed. We took a different route to the city, switching cabs twice to lose the tail. By the time we walked into the lobby of the Liberty Place Tower, my heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. But my face was a mask of stone. Kingswell Title Escrow was on the 42nd floor. The elevator ride felt like an ascent to the gallows. The doors opened onto a plush reception area with marble floors and a view of the entire city. Dana was waiting for us. She looked impeccable in a navy suit. Standing next to her was a man in a gray blazer who looked like a weary accountant, but had the sharp, scanning eyes of a cop. Ella, Dana said. This is Detective Hargrave. Hargrave nodded. He didn't smile. Ms. Perez, your mother was a good woman. We are going to make this right. Is he here? I asked. He is in conference room B, Dana said. He arrived 10 minutes ago. Tessa is with him. They are drinking coffee and looking very pleased with themselves. Did he ask about the buyer? He thinks the buyer is a man named Mr. Sterling, Dana said. One of my associates is in there playing the role. He is stalling, going over the title commitment line by line. What is the plan? We let him sign the deed, Hargrave said. We let the notary stamp it. We let him sign the settlement statement authorizing the wire. Once he hands that paper over, the crime is committed. That is when you walk in. And the wire? Reed asked. We don't actually send the money, right? The wire is frozen, Dana said. The bank has been alerted, but Calvin won't know that. He will think he is seconds away from his payout. I took a deep breath. Okay, I am ready. We walked down the long hallway. The carpet swallowed the sound of our footsteps. I could hear voices drifting from the open door of conference room B. Very straightforward transaction, a man's voice was saying. That was the actor playing Mr. Sterling. Excellent, Calvin's voice. He sounded jovial, expansive. We appreciate the efficiency. As I said, the property is turnkey. You are getting a steal. And the keys? Right here, Calvin said. I heard the jingle of metal. Front door, back door, garage, all yours. I stopped just outside the door. I could see them through the crack in the frosted glass panel. Calvin was sitting at the head of the table, leaning back in his chair, a pen twirling in his fingers. Tessa was next to him, scrolling on her phone, looking bored. She was wearing a white coat that looked expensive. All right, the fake buyer said. Let's sign the deed. I watched as Calvin leaned forward. He uncapped his pen. He signed his name with a flourish, a big, bold signature. Calvin Rourke. He slid the paper to the notary. The notary stamped it. Thump. And the settlement statement, the buyer said. This confirms the wire instructions. Calvin signed that too. He was smiling, a wide, predatory smile. He looked at Tessa and winked. Done, Calvin said. When does the wire hit? It is being initiated now, the buyer said. That was the signal. Dana nodded to me. Hargrave stepped up behind me. I pushed the door open. The room went silent. Calvin looked up. His smile froze, then shattered into a look of pure confusion. Ella, he stammered. What are you doing here? Tessa dropped her phone on the table. It made a loud clatter. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I walked to the end of the table and stood directly opposite him. I placed the blue folder, the real Perez Family Trust, on the mahogany surface. I am here for the closing. Calvin, I said. My voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. I heard you were selling my house. You can't be here, Calvin said. Standing up, his face was flushing red. This is a private transaction. Security? Where is security? Sit down, mister. Rourke, Hargrave said. Stepping into the room, he didn't shout, but his voice carried the weight of authority. He flashed his badge. State police? Financial crimes? Calvin's knees buckled. He fell back into his chair. What is this? Calvin whispered. Tessa. Tessa looked like she was about to vomit. She was staring at the door, as if calculating the distance to run. You just signed a warranty deed, I said, pointing to the paper in front of him. You swore you owned the property. You swore there were no other claims. I opened the blue folder. This is the Perez Family Trust, I said. Clause 14. Any attempt by the life tenant to alienate or sell the property results in immediate forfeiture of residency rights. I looked him in the eye. You didn't just sell the house, Calvin. You evicted yourself. As of the moment you signed that paper, you are trespassing. Calvin looked at the deed, then at me. The deed, Mom signed it. Mom didn't sign it, I said. And Arthur Miller didn't notarize it. He has been in jail for 2 years. Calvin's face went white. How do you know that? Because I read the box in the garage, I said. The color drained from his face completely. He knew. He knew exactly what was in that box. And one more thing, I said. Reaching into my pocket, I pulled out my phone and played the audio clip. I am telling you, the signature looks wrong. Nobody checks anything. This is a cash deal. His own voice filled the room, jagged and damning. Calvin looked at Tessa. You recorded me. No, I said. I recorded you, the library cameras. Calvin, you forgot about the backup system. Hargrave moved forward. Calvin Rourke, you are under arrest for wire fraud, forgery, and attempted grand larceny. Calvin stood up, knocking his chair over. No, this is a mistake. I was just managing the assets, Ella. Tell them I was doing this for us. He reached out to me, his hands shaking. Ella, please. The people I owe, they will kill me. You can't let them take me. I am not letting them take you, Calvin, I said cold. I am saving you. He blinked. What? Prison is the safest place for you right now, I said, because the people you owe can't get to you in a cell. You should thank me. Hargrave cuffed him. The click of the metal was the loudest sound in the world. As they dragged him toward the door, Calvin looked back at me. His eyes were wild, desperate. But then, his gaze shifted past me, to the glass wall of the conference room. He saw something. His eyes widened in true terror. It wasn't me, he screamed at the glass. I tried to sell it. I turned around, standing in the lobby, watching the scene unfold with a calm, detached expression, was a man I had never seen before. He was wearing a black trench coat. He wasn't a cop. He wasn't a lawyer. He looked at Calvin. Then he looked at me. He nodded. Once, slowly. And then he turned and walked away toward the elevators. My phone buzzed. It was the same number from before. Deal canceled. You keep the house. We will collect from Calvin elsewhere. I stared at the retreating figure. The twist wasn't that Calvin was a criminal. The twist was that he was just the middleman. The real danger had walked out the door, and I had just handed Calvin over to the only people who could protect him, the police. I looked back at the table. The deed was there. The trust was there. I picked up the keys Calvin had thrown on the table, the heavy brass key to Juniper Hill. It is over, Reed said, putting his hand on my shoulder. No, I said, watching the elevator doors close on the man in the trench coat. It is just beginning, but this time I hold the keys. The 30 minutes inside Conference Room B at Kingswell Title Escrow were the longest of my life. I was standing in the observation room next door, a small, windowless space usually reserved for partners to monitor high-stakes negotiations. Through the one-way mirror, the conference room looked like a stage set for a play about corporate greed. The lighting was recessed and flattering, casting a soft glow over the polished mahogany table. The air conditioning was set to a brisk 68 degrees, but I could see the sheen of sweat on Calvin's forehead from 10 feet away. The room smelled of money. It is a specific scent, a blend of fresh espresso, expensive leather chair upholstery, and the crisp, chemical tang of laser-printed documents. Calvin had dressed for the occasion. He was wearing a double-breasted charcoal suit that I recognized. It was an Armani he had bought for my mother's 50th birthday party, back when he was still trying to play the role of the doting husband. Now, it looked a size too small, straining at the buttons as he leaned forward, his posture rigid and anxious. He kept checking his watch, a nervous tick that had become a metronome for his desperation. Tessa sat to his right. She looked like she was waiting for a flight to Cabo. She wore a white cashmere coat draped over her shoulders and oversized sunglasses that she had pushed up into her hair. She wasn't looking at the documents. She was scrolling through her phone, her thumb flicking rhythmically against the glass screen. Opposite them sat Mr. Sterling, in reality. He was a senior paralegal from Dana's firm, a man with a poker face carved out of granite. To Calvin, he was the representative of Redbridge Acquisitions, the man with the $2.5 million. At the head of the table sat the title officer, a woman named Sarah. She was the only innocent civilian in the room. She had organized the paperwork into neat stacks: the deed, the bill of sale, the affidavits, and the settlement statement. "Can we speed this up?" Calvin asked, his voice tight. "My client has a flight to catch." He gestured vaguely at Tessa, who didn't even look up. "Standard procedure, Mr. Rourke." "Mr." Sterling said, his voice smooth and unhurried. "We need to verify the pro-rations for the property taxes and the fuel oil." "It is full," Calvin snapped. "The tank is full. I filled it last week. Just put it on the credit." I watched his hands. They were trembling, not a lot, but enough that when he reached for the glass of water in front of him, the ice cubes clinked against the crystal. He was terrified. He was thinking about Friday. He was thinking about the men who knew where he parked his car. "Calm down," Tessa murmured, loud enough for the microphone in the room to pick up. "You are acting guilty." "Shut up," Calvin hissed back. Sarah, the title officer, cleared her throat. She looked uncomfortable. She sensed the tension. But she had a job to do. "All right," Sarah said, sliding a document across the table. "This is the affidavit of title. This is where you, as the seller, swear under oath that there are no unrecorded liens, no boundary disputes, and no other parties with a claim to the property." This was it. The trap was set. "Sign here," Sarah said, pointing to the line. "And here," Calvin picked up the pen. It was a heavy, expensive rollerball provided by the firm. He hovered over the paper for a fraction of a second. "Is the title insurance binder clear?" Calvin asked. "Clear as a bell," Sarah said. "Based on the records you provided." He signed. I watched the ink flow onto the page. That signature was the first nail. "Now," Sarah said, moving to the next document. "This is the grant deed. This transfers ownership from the Perez Family Trust to Redbridge Acquisitions. By signing this, you are stating that you have the legal authority to act on behalf of the trust and that you are the sole decision-maker." "Mr. Sterling leaned forward. This was the specific line Dana had scripted for him. "Mr. Rourke," Sterling said, pausing for effect. "Before we execute this, our board requires a verbal confirmation. We noticed the original trust documents listed a daughter, Ella Perez. Does she have any residual interest in the property? We do not want a quiet title action 6 months from now." Calvin didn't blink. He didn't hesitate. He looked Sterling dead in the eye and delivered the lie that would send him to prison. "Ella is out of the picture," Calvin said firmly. "She was compensated separately. She signed a waiver of interest 2 days ago. She has left the state." I felt Reed's hand squeeze my shoulder in the observation room. "He just said it," Reed whispered. "He is on the record." "Keep watching," I said. "And she has no rights of residency," Sterling pressed. "None," Calvin said. "She moved out voluntarily. The house is empty." He signed the deed. Tessa shifted in her chair. She seemed bored by the legalities. She reached for her coffee, and as she did, the sleeve of her coat pulled back. There it was, the Cartier Lark. It was resting against her wrist, wrapped twice to fit as a bracelet instead of a necklace. The diamonds caught the overhead halogen lights, fracturing the beam into tiny rainbows that danced across the legal documents. I felt a surge of heat rise up my neck. Seeing it on a screen was one thing. Seeing it in that room, just inches away from the pen Calvin was using to sell my birthright, was visceral. It felt like she was desecrating a grave. "Nice bracelet," Sarah commented, trying to make polite conversation while she stamped the notary seal. Tessa smiled, touching the diamonds. "Thank you. It is a family heirloom. From Calvin's side." I gasped. The audacity. She was claiming my mother's history as her own. "Okay," Calvin interrupted, tapping the table. "Paperwork is done. Let's talk about the wire." "We are just finalizing the settlement statement," Sarah said. "I have the wiring instructions here. Keystone Regional Bank. Account ending in 9904. Correct." "Correct," Calvin said. "Initiate it now." "I need to upload the signed deed to the county recorder's portal first," Sarah said. She turned to her computer. "It takes 30 seconds. The room went silent. The only sound was the clicking of Sarah's keyboard. Calvin was staring at the screen on her desk, as if he could will the progress bar to move faster. He wiped his palms on his trousers. "Come on," he muttered. "Just a moment," Sarah said. She frowned. She tapped the enter key again. "What is it?" Calvin asked, his voice pitching up. "The system is lagging," Sarah said. "I am getting a flag." "What flag?" Calvin stood up. "You said the title was clear." "It is," Sarah said, looking confused. "But the county clerk's database just popped up a warning. It says, 'Subject property is under active lis pendens alert.'" "That is impossible," Calvin said. "There is no lawsuit." "It is not a lawsuit," Sarah said, squinting at the monitor. "It is a fraud alert. Placed this morning. Calvin's face went the color of ash. He turned to Mr. Sterling. What is this? Are you playing games? We didn't place the alert, Sterling said calmly. Perhaps you should check with your attorney. I am the attorney, in fact, Calvin shouted. I am the trustee. Override it. I want that wire sent. I can't override a county fraud alert. Mr. Rourke, Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly. She pushed her chair back. I need to call my manager. No, Calvin lunged toward the desk. You send the money, I sign the papers, the deal is closed. Tessa stood up too, grabbing her purse. Calvin, what is going on? You said this was fixed. It is fixed, Calvin yelled. He looked like a trapped animal. He looked at the door. It is just a glitch. The air in the room was thick with panic. This was the moment. The closing was dead. The wire was never coming. The illusion of safety had shattered. But before I could reach for the handle of the door to make my entrance, the door to the conference room opened. It wasn't me. It was a man in a rumpled brown suit. He didn't look like a lawyer. He looked like he had slept in his car. He walked into the room with a casual, heavy gait, holding a paper coffee cup in one hand and a small leather wallet in the other. Calvin froze. Who are you? This is a private meeting. The man didn't answer immediately. He walked over to the table, ignoring Calvin, ignoring Tessa, ignoring the stunned title officer. He placed the coffee cup down on a coaster. Then, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, white business card. He slid it across the mahogany table until it rested right on top of the deed Calvin had just signed. The room went deathly silent. Calvin looked down at the card. I could see his eyes widen. You are Arthur Miller, the man said. His voice was gravelly and low. Calvin blinked. What? The notary, the man said. On the deed you showed your stepdaughter 3 days ago, Arthur Miller. I don't know who that is, Calvin stammered. That is strange, the man said, because I am Detective Hargrave, and I arrested Arthur Miller 2 years ago. He is currently serving time in a state correctional facility in Cole Township. Hargrave leaned over the table. Placing both hands on the wood, he loomed over Calvin. So, Mr. Rourke, Hargrave said softly, I am very curious to know how a man sitting in a prison cell managed to notarize your signature on a document dated last November. Calvin opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at the door, then at the window, then at Tessa. Tessa was backing away slowly, her hand clutching the diamond bracelet as if she could hide it. And you, Hargrave said, not even turning his head to look at her. Ms. Lyle, I wouldn't leave just yet. We have questions about the inventory of the estate. Specifically, grand larceny of personal property. Tessa froze against the wall. Calvin slumped back into his chair. The fight went out of him. He looked small. He looked defeated. I didn't mean to, Calvin whispered. I needed the money. We know, Hargrave said. He stood up straight and looked toward the mirror toward me. He nodded once. That is all for the prelude, Hargrave said to the room. I think the real owner of this house would like a word. He stepped aside, clearing the path to the head of the table. In the observation room, I buttoned my jacket. I smoothed my hair. I picked up the blue folder. Ready, Reed asked. I have been ready for 100 years. I said. I walked out of the observation room and into the hallway. The door to conference room B was open. I could see Calvin sitting there, his head in his hands. He thought he had lost to the police. He thought he had lost to a detective. He was about to realize he had lost to the girl he tried to erase. I stepped into the doorway. The marble floor clicked under my heels. Hello? Calvin? I said. He looked up, and for the first time, he didn't see a stepdaughter. He saw the executioner. I stepped fully into the room, and the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Calvin Rourke looked at me, and then he looked down at the ink still wet on the documents in front of him, a flicker of his old arrogance, that desperate need to be the smartest man in the room, flared up one last time. He let out a dry, jagged laugh. You are too late, Ella, He pointed a shaking finger at the stack of papers. The deed is signed. The settlement statement is executed. The house is sold. You can wave your little blue folder all you want, but the law is the law. The transfer is done. He looked at Dana, expecting her to crumble, but Dana did not crumble. She simply walked to the table and placed the original Perez family trust document right on top of his forged deed. Actually, Calvin, Dana said, her voice sharp and precise, the law is exactly why we are standing here. And you are right about one thing. The transfer is done. But not the one you think. Calvin frowned. What are you talking about? Dana opened the blue folder to page 14. She spun it around so he could read the highlighted text. Clause 14. Section B. Dana read aloud. The automatic forfeiture on alienation. This clause states that if the holder of the conditional life estate attempts to sell, mortgage, encumber, or otherwise alienate the property, their right of residency is immediately and irrevocably terminated. She looked him in the eye. It does not matter if the sale goes through. Calvin, it does not matter if the deed is valid or forged. The moment your pen touched that paper, the moment you signed your name with the intent to sell Juniper Hill, you triggered the self-destruct mechanism your late wife built into the trust. I stepped forward. Before you signed that paper 5 minutes ago, you had a legal right to sleep in my mother's house. I said, you had a roof over your head. But you got greedy. You wanted the cash. And by signing that warranty deed, you just evicted yourself. You are no longer a resident. You are a trespasser. Calvin stared at the document. His mouth opened and closed like a fish on a dock. But I sold it, he stammered. The wire? The money is coming. I don't need to live there if I have the money. Detective Hargrave cleared his throat. He picked up the settlement statement Calvin had signed. About that, Hargrave said, you see, Mr. Rourke, for a wire transfer to be legal, it has to be based on a legitimate transaction. But since you used a forged deed notarized by a man currently sitting in a prison cell to sell a house you do not own, the transaction is void. It is fraud. Hargrave pulled a radio from his belt. Central. This is Hargrave. The subject has executed the documents. The intent to defraud is confirmed. Freeze the wire at the originating bank. Do not let the funds leave the Redbridge account. Calvin's head snapped up. Redbridge. Dana smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Redbridge Acquisitions is a holding company. Calvin, she said, I created it on Tuesday. We didn't buy your house. We just bought your confession. The silence that followed was absolute. I watched the realization wash over him. The color drained from his face until he looked like a wax figure. The arrogance, the bluster, the carefully constructed mask of the grieving widower, it all disintegrated. He wasn't a mastermind. He was just a man who had walked into a cage and locked the door from the inside. No, Calvin whispered. No, you can't do this. He turned to me. His eyes were wide and wet with tears. He reached out a hand, but he didn't dare touch me. Ella, he pleaded. Ella, listen to me. I was desperate. You don't know these people. The lenders. They are going to kill me. If I don't have that money by Friday, I am a dead man. I did this for us. I did it to save the family from them. He tried to smile, a grotesque, trembling expression. I am your father. Ella, I raised you. I took care of your mother. You can't let them send me to prison. You can't let them kill me. Please, just tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them we can work this out. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had thrown an eviction notice on my mother's desk an hour after her funeral. I looked at the man who had stolen her jewelry and given it to his mistress. I looked at the man who had drained her savings to pay for his own mistakes. I felt nothing. No anger, no pity, just a cold, hard clarity. You are not my father. I said, my father was a man who built things. You are a man who sells things you didn't earn. And you didn't take care of my mother. You lived off her. You were a parasite. Calvin. And when the host died, you tried to consume the remains. I leaned in close. And as for the people you owe, I am not sending you to your death. I am sending you to the only place they can't reach you. You are going to federal prison for wire fraud and identity theft. You will be safe there. You should be thanking me." Calvin made a sound like a wounded animal. He slumped forward, burying his face in his hands, beside him. Tessa stood up abruptly. The movement was sharp and panicked. She grabbed her purse and turned toward the door. "I am leaving," she announced, her voice shrill. "This has nothing to do with me. I was just here for moral support. I didn't sign anything. I didn't know about any forgery." She took 2 steps toward the exit. "Sit down." "Ms. Lyle," Hargrave said. He didn't move to block her, but his voice was like a physical wall. "I am not involved," Tessa shrieked. "I am just his assistant." Reed stepped forward from the back of the room. He held up a tablet. On the screen was a freeze frame from the library video. It showed Tessa holding the flashlight while Calvin practiced the forged signature. "We have video of you conspiring to fabricate the deed," Reed said calmly. "We have audio of you discussing the illegal loan sharks. You aren't a bystander. Tessa, you are a co-conspirator. Conspiracy to commit wire fraud carries the same sentence as the fraud itself, up to 20 years. Tessa stopped. She looked at the tablet, then at Calvin, then at me. Her face crumpled. "He made me do it," she cried, pointing a manicured finger at Calvin. "He told me it was legal. He told me the daughter was crazy. I walked over to her. I didn't look at her face. I looked at her wrist. 'Give it to me,' I said." Tessa blinked, clutching her wrist against her chest. "What, the bracelet?" I said, "The Cartier Lark. It belongs to the Perez estate. It is stolen property. If you walk out of this room with it, the detective will add possession of stolen goods to your charge sheet." Tessa looked at Hargrave. He nodded slowly. "Take it off," Hargrave said. With shaking fingers, Tessa unclasped the bracelet. The diamonds sparkled one last time under the fluorescent lights before she dropped it into my open hand. It felt heavy. It felt warm. It felt like my mother was finally coming home. I put the bracelet in my pocket. "Officers," Hargrave said. 2 uniformed officers entered the room. They pulled Calvin up from the chair. He could barely stand. He was sobbing now, a broken, messy sound that echoed in the high-end conference room. They cuffed his hands behind his back. Then they cuffed Tessa. As they were leading Calvin out, his phone buzzed on the table. It buzzed once, twice, 3 times. Hargrave picked it up. He looked at the screen. "It is them," Hargrave said. "The lenders." He turned the screen so I could see. The text message was from the same number that had messaged me earlier. "The wire didn't hit. We warned you. Calvin. But don't worry. We know where you are. We also know where the police are." I looked at Hargrave, confused. "You know who they are?" Hargrave smiled grimly. "We have been tracking this network for 2 years. Ms. Perez, they aren't just loan sharks. They operate a predatory lending scheme disguised as a business consulting firm called Vertex Capital. They prey on desperate executors of estates. We needed a link. We needed someone to lead us to their accounts." He held up Calvin's phone. "By attempting to wire $600,000 to their Shell account today, Calvin just gave us the routing number we have been hunting for. He didn't just incriminate himself. He handed us the entire network. That text message you got last night, that was us. We intercepted their communications. We wanted to make sure you showed up. We needed the pressure on Calvin to be absolute, so he would make the mistake of trying to push the wire through." I looked at Calvin. He wasn't just a villain. He was a pawn. He was a weak, greedy man who had been eaten alive by sharks, and in his thrashing, he had exposed the whole school. "Get them out of here," Hargrave said. I watched as they dragged Calvin and Tessa down the hallway. The glass doors of the office opened, and I could see the flash of cameras in the lobby, the neighbors, the community, the people Calvin had tried to manipulate. They would see him in handcuffs. The narrative was over. The lie was dead. I turned back to the table. The forged deed lay there, a useless piece of paper. The real trust document lay on top of it, victorious. Dana walked over and put a hand on my shoulder. "It is done. Ella," she said softly. "The house is safe. The assets are frozen. We will petition the court tomorrow to quiet the title and formally remove his name from everything. It will take time, but the hard part is over." I took a deep breath. For the first time in a week, my lungs filled with air that didn't taste like panic. "Thank you." "Dana," I said. Reed walked over and took my hand. His grip was solid and warm. "Do you want to go home?" he asked. I nodded. "Yes, I want to go home." We drove back to Juniper Hill in silence. The snow had started to fall, dusting the world in clean, white powder. When we pulled up to the iron gates, the black SUV was gone. The security guards had vanished the moment the checks bounced. The house stood tall and proud on the hill, its brick facade distinct against the gray sky. It looked lonely, but it looked strong. I walked up the stone steps. I didn't use the key Calvin had thrown on the table. I used my own key, the one I had kept since I was 14. The lock clicked. The door swung open. The house was quiet. The heat was still on, but the stifling, oppressive atmosphere was gone. It felt like the house was holding its breath, waiting to see who had walked in. I walked into the foyer. I saw the spot where Calvin had stood when he evicted me. I saw the desk where he had thrown the papers. I saw the empty spaces on the walls where the art used to hang. I didn't stop there. I walked to the kitchen. I opened the drawer where we kept the spares. I took out a screwdriver. "Come on," I said to Reed. We spent the next 2 hours changing every lock in the house. Front door, back door, garage, side entry. We stripped the old hardware and replaced it with the new deadbolts we had bought on the way home. It was physical work. It was loud. It was necessary. With every screw I turned, I felt a little more weight lift off my shoulders. I was sealing the breach. I was reclaiming the territory. When we were finished, the sun was setting, the house was secure. We sat on the floor of the living room, just like we had in that cramped studio apartment. But this time, we had space. We had peace. I pulled the blue folder out of my bag. I took out the letter my mother had written. The words on the front were the same Ella read when you need courage. I opened it again. Reed sat beside me, his arm around my shoulders. "Do not let him win." She had written. I looked around the room. The shadows were lengthening, stretching across the floorboards my mother had walked on for 30 years. He didn't win. "Mom," I whispered into the quiet air. I thought about revenge. I used to think revenge was about screaming, about making the other person hurt, about burning their world down. But as I sat there, safe in the house that was finally mine, I realized I was wrong. Calvin had burned his own world down. He had lit the match with his greed and fanned the flames with his lies. All I had done was ensure he couldn't drag me into the fire with him. Real revenge isn't about destruction. It is about survival. It is about standing still and letting the truth do its work. It is about holding the key in your hand and knowing that the person who tried to lock you out is the one who ended up in a cell. I leaned my head on Reed's shoulder. "We have a lot of work to do," I said. "We have to clean this place up. We have to find the art he sold. We have to fix the garden. We have time." Reed said, "We have all the time in the world." I closed my eyes. Outside, the snow was falling harder, covering the tracks of the SUV, covering the muddy footprints Calvin had left on the walkway, covering the past in a blanket of white. I was tired, but it was a good tired. It was the exhaustion of a soldier who has put down their sword because the war is over. I was home. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed this journey of justice and resilience. Please let me know in the comments section down below where you are listening from. I would love to hear your thoughts on Ella's decision and the final twist. Don't forget to subscribe to the Juliet Revenge Stories channel. Like this video and smash that hype button to help this story reach more people. See you in the next video.